Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day. It's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. The silence was the first violation. In all my years, tending to fractured lives, no dwelling had ever presented such an absolute, suffocating void of sound. Before me stood the Holloway place, an old farmhouse whose timbers sagged, whose paint peeled like sunburnt skin against the impossible verdancy of the surrounding fields. A wrongness permeated the air, a dissonant chord vibrating deep in my marrow. This appointment had hung over my morning like a shroud. The Holloways, notorious for their volatile domestic tempests, were usually my colleague's burden, but illness had sidelined her. "Just a standard welfare check, Eleanor," my supervisor had offered, a flimsy reassurance against the intuition tightening in my chest as I stood upon the groaning porch boards, my fist hesitating a breath away from the wood. My knock echoed, swallowed whole by the stillness. Nothing stirred within. I struck the door again, harder, the sound booming unnaturally. Still, only silence answered. The unease that had fluttered within me coiled now into a cold knot of apprehension. "Hello?" I projected my voice, pressing an ear against the weathered grain. "Mr. Holloway, Mrs. Holloway, it's Eleanor Vance from Social Services. I'm here for our scheduled appointment." The silence held. Tentatively, I tried the knob. It yielded with startling ease, turning smoothly under my palm. The door complained open on rusty hinges, unveiling an interior steeped in shadow. "Hello?" I repeated, stepping across the threshold with a caution bordering on dread. "Is anyone present?" The living room was a ruin. Furniture lay capsized, picture frames gaped empty or lay in glittering shards upon the floorboards, and dark, ominous blooms stained the carpet, catching the breath in my throat. My gaze swept the wreckage. A lamp fractured near the sofa, its cord snaking across the floor like a dead thing. A vase of decaying blooms overturned on the coffee table, water weeping onto the pages of an open book beneath. My hand, trembling, fumbled for my phone, poised to summon the authorities, but a sound from above arrested the motion. Faint, almost illusory, a whimper, barely discernible above the frantic drumming of my own heart. Every rational fiber urged retreat, demanded I flee and call for backup. Yet, the possibility of someone injured, trapped in that silence. I swallowed against the dryness in my mouth and moved towards the staircase, each tread protesting my weight. "Hello?" My voice was a thin, wavering thing. "Is someone up there? I'm here to offer help." Another whimper, slightly stronger now, emanating from behind a closed door at the far end of the upstairs landing. I advanced with deliberate slowness, my hand reaching for the tarnished brass knob. "I'm going to open this door," I announced, striving for a calm I didn't feel. "I won't harm you. I only want to ensure you're all right." The knob turned. I pushed the door inward, revealing a small, shadowed bedroom. Empty, it seemed at first glance. Then my eyes adjusted, finding her, a small girl, surely no older than 7 or 8, compressed into the corner behind a heavy dresser. Her eyes were vast pools of terror, her slight frame quivering uncontrollably. "Hello there," I murmured, sinking slowly to her level. "My name is Eleanor. What's yours?" No reply came, only the unwavering intensity of that terrified gaze. "It's all right," I continued, maintaining a careful distance, a buffer against her fear. "I'm here to help you. Can you tell me what transpired?" A long moment stretched, thick with unspoken horrors. Then a voice, fragile as spun glass, whispered, "They took them." I traced a path down my spine. "Who took who, little one?" "The bad men," she breathed, her small chin trembling. "They took Mama and Papa." My thoughts fractured, racing through grim possibilities. Kidnapping? A violent home invasion? What nightmare had unfolded within these walls? "When did this happen?" I asked, battling the surge of panic in my own chest to keep my tone even. "Last night," she whispered. "I hid in the closet. Papa told me to. I heard shouting. Then it went quiet." I nodded, a profound ache settling in my heart for this child, this solitary witness to unspeakable events. "You were very brave to stay hidden," I reassured her gently. "You did exactly the right thing. Can you come out now? I promise I will keep you safe." She hesitated, a small bird weighing flight, then slowly, cautiously, unfolded herself from behind the dresser. I saw then what she clutched fiercely against her chest, a plush rabbit, its fur worn smooth with affection. "That's a lovely rabbit," I offered, seeking a sliver of normalcy. "Does he have a name?" "Captain Cuddles," she mumbled, hugging the toy tighter. "Well, Captain Cuddles looks like an excellent companion," I said, summoning a soft smile. "I imagine he's been keeping you company?" She nodded, the barest phantom of a smile touching her lips. "And what's your name, sweetie?" I prompted again. "Clara," she replied, the sound barely disturbing the air. "It's very nice to meet you, Clara," I said. "I know you must be terribly frightened, but I'm going to do absolutely everything I can to help you and find your parents. Do you understand?" She nodded once more, her wide eyes suddenly swimming with tears. I knew my priority was twofold: remove her from this place of trauma, yet preserve the scene for the inevitable investigation. A delicate, agonizing balance. "Clara, we need to leave this house now," I explained softly. "Is there anything special you want to bring with you? Besides Captain Cuddles, of course." She shook her head, her grip tightening on the stuffed animal as if it were an anchor. "All right, that's perfectly fine. We can always come back for your things later," I assured her. "Can you be extra brave for me now? Can you close your eyes very tight while we go downstairs? I'm going to carry you." Clara nodded, squeezing her eyes shut and burying her face into Captain Cuddles' soft flank. I lifted her easily. She felt impossibly light, fragile as a bird's egg. Descending the stairs, I forced myself to look straight ahead, shielding her, shielding myself perhaps from the stark evidence of the struggle scattered around us. Outside, under the vast, indifferent sky, I hurried to my car, carefully securing Clara in the back seat. "You can open your eyes now, sweetie," I said, clicking the buckle into place. "You're safe now." As soon as she was settled, I stepped away, dialing 911 with hands that still shook, relaying the grim discovery to the dispatcher. Assurances came back. Police and Child Protective Services were en route. While the minutes stretched, thick with anticipation, I focused on Clara. "So, tell me about Captain Cuddles," I encouraged gently. "How long have you two been friends?" Clara hugged the rabbit. "Since I was a baby," she said, her voice small. "Mama gave him to me." "He looks like he gives wonderful hugs," I said, smiling. "And I bet he's very good at keeping secrets too, isn't he?" Clara nodded with solemn conviction. "He knows everything." I leaned closer, adopting a conspiratorial whisper. Do you think Captain Cuddles might know anything about what happened last night?" Clara's eyes widened. She looked down at the worn toy, a silent communion passing between them. For a heartbeat, I feared she would retreat into silence again. Then, she whispered, the words barely audible, "Captain Cuddles says the bad men came because of Papa's special books. The ones down in the cellar I'm not supposed to know about." My mind seized on the phrase. Special books? In the cellar? What labyrinth had Mr. Holloway wandered into? Before I could probe further, the distant wail of sirens sliced through the rural quiet. Clara stiffened beside me. "It's okay," I reassured her quickly. "Those are the helpers. They're coming to help us." Police cruisers materialized, followed closely by a CPS vehicle, their arrival shattering the farm's eerie seclusion. I gave Clara's small hand a gentle squeeze. "I need to speak with these people for a little while," I explained, "but I promise I will be right back, all right?" She nodded, her knuckles white around Captain Cuddles. The ensuing hours blurred into a maelstrom of official procedures. I recounted my discovery to the police, watched as they draped the house in yellow tape, transforming it into a formal crime scene, and liaised with CPS to arrange emergency shelter for Clara. Yet, beneath the procedural surface, a chilling certainty grew. We had merely grazed the dark heart of the Holloway family's secrets. As dusk began to bleed across the fields, painting the farmhouse in long, melancholic shadows, I found myself beside Detective Moreau, the lead investigator. "Any sense of what we're looking at here?" I asked quietly, mindful of Clara waiting in the CPS vehicle nearby. Moreau exhaled slowly, his face etched with weariness. "Hard to say definitively. Obvious signs of a violent struggle. Blood evidence suggests at least one firearm discharge. And then there's the basement." My eyebrows lifted. "The special books Clara mentioned?" "Affirmative," Moreau sighed. "Looks like Mr. Holloway was swimming in some deep, dirty water. Financial ledgers, offshore account details, classic money laundering setup. My working theory? He crossed the wrong people who don't forgive debts." My gaze drifted back to Clara. a wave of sorrow washing over me. A child's universe fractured by adult greed and recklessness. What happens now? I asked, the question heavy. We'll pursue all leads regarding the parents, but Moreau let the sentence hang, the grim implication unspoken. The girl goes into emergency foster care for the immediate future. We'll need her full statement, but given the trauma, we proceed with extreme care. I nodded, acknowledging the tightrope walk between the demands of justice and the fragility of a child's psyche. As I watched the CPS car pull away, carrying Clara and Captain Cuddles into an uncertain future, I felt the familiar weight of this work settle upon me. How many other Claras were out there, balanced precariously on the edge of ruin forged by others? Sliding into my own car, my hands clenched the steering wheel. The heartbreak was a constant companion in this profession, an ache that never fully subsided. But for children like Clara, lost in the wreckage, I had to keep showing up. I had to keep fighting. Driving away from the farmhouse, leaving the flashing lights and the stark yellow tape behind, I made a silent vow to the small girl with the terrified eyes. I would follow this path wherever it led. She deserved truth. She deserved justice. She deserved the chance to heal. The journey ahead felt vast and shadowed, but I would walk it alongside her, step by painstaking step. This needs telling. What found me last month off I-70, holed up in a place called the Serenity Stop Inn. 20 years I've wrestled 18-wheelers across this country, bunked down in 1,000 peeling roadside boxes, but never, not once, has anything burrowed under my skin quite like this. I'm etching it down now, you understand, because sleep offers no escape. Behind my eyelids, there's only that goddamn chair. It began under a weeping sky, somewhere past 11 on a Tuesday night. Furniture, Chicago to KC, a long haul, and the road hypnosis was setting in, the white lines starting to swim. Missouri unspooled into monotonous darkness, mile after empty mile. Pull over or plow into the ditch, that was the choice. Then a smear of neon bled through the drizzle. The Serenity Stop Inn. Vacancy. Below it, the siren song, $29 nightly, seemed heaven sent. The lot was a scattering of ghosts. My rig, a pickup shedding rust like autumn leaves, 2 anonymous sedans huddled on the fractured blacktop. Stepping into the office was like inhaling stale smoke filtered through cheap pine air freshener. Behind the counter, adrift in the blue glow of a smartphone, slouched a pale youth, maybe 19, his face a roadmap of adolescent miseries, hair slick with neglect. He barely registered my entrance. Room for one, I grunted, fishing for my wallet. He slid a registration slip across the scarred laminate. Cash? Card? Card. I scrawled my details while he processed the visa, the pen tethered to the counter by a length of fishing line, a captive thing. 115, he murmured, finally looking up, eyes vacant. He passed over a plastic fob, large as a tarot card bearing the room number. Building yonder, end unit, out by 11. Rain fell with more conviction as I trudged back to the truck, grabbed the overnight duffel, then the smaller satchel holding the essentials, wallet, laptop, logbook, trusting that stuff to the cab overnight, Even out here in the sprawling void, not a chance. Room 115. It exhaled the precise aroma of $30 well spent. Stale air, the ghost of beige carpeting, wallpaper lifting at the seams like old bandages. A queen bed dominated, draped in a thin, indeterminate brown spread. And there, stationed by the window, sentinel in the gloom, sat a wooden chair. Simple, sturdy. Beside it, a small table tilted a lampshade askew. My bags landed with a soft thud onto the chair's seat. Ritual commenced. Test the locks, survey the bathroom's grim surfaces for overt biohazards, scan the mattress edges. Satisfied mostly. The wall heater coughed, then wheezed into life, churning out warm air thick with the scent of settled dust. The bed groaned under my weight as I wrestled off my boots, my spine singing a protest after 10 hours clamped behind the wheel. Muffled, sitcom laughter seeped through the wall from the adjacent room. Rain drummed a restless tattoo against the window pane. A quick, scalding shower, sweats and a worn t-shirt, alarm set, 0600 sharp. The pillow felt less like cushion, more like a folded towel, but exhaustion is its own anesthetic. I remember, just before killing the lamp, my gaze snagged on the chair. My luggage slumped there, a heap of nylon and canvas. Then, darkness. 3:17 a.m. That's what the clock radio's angry red numerals declared when my eyes flew open. Instant, total wakefulness. Something had fractured the sleep, but what? The neighbor's television was mute. The rain had ceased. Only the heater's low thrum disturbed the profound quiet. And then I saw it. The chair. My bags weren't on it. They rested on the floor, placed with unnatural neatness beside its legs. That was wrong, but it wasn't the thing that sent ice water sluicing through my veins. The chair itself, it bore an impression. The solid wood seat dipped, subtly concave, exactly as if occupied. The armrests held faint, symmetrical depressions where hands might lie, but the air above it was empty, undisturbed. I lay pinned, breath caught in my throat. The indentations spoke of weight, of adult mass, and the room, inexplicably, had shed degrees, a palpable chill settling deep in my bones. Denial clamored first. A dream, just fatigue painting demons. But the clock's digits burned too sharply, the heater's hum was too present, too real, and deeper than sight or sound, I felt it, a dense knot of presence sharing the small stale space. My mind scrabbled for logic. Worn wood? Had I sleepwalked, moved the bags myself? Absurd. The chair was solid timber, no cushion, and I hadn't wandered in my sleep since childhood terrors faded. Headlights sliced across the far wall as a car sped past on the highway, a fleeting blade of illumination. In that momentary wash of light, I swear the chair settled, a minute adjustment, as though its unseen occupant shifted. My heart became a frantic fist hammering against my ribs. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead despite the room's creeping frost. Flight screamed through my nerves, but the path to the door led directly past it. A silent scream built, strangling itself in my constricted throat. Time stretched, became viscous. Rigid beneath the thin covers, I stared, my vision locked on that corner. Was there movement? A flicker in the shadowed depression? A subtle flex along the wooden arms? The dimness, filtered through the cheap curtains, played tricks perhaps. or perhaps not. 3:42 a.m. A sound, soft, dry, abrasive, like worn leather scuffing against threadbare carpet. It emanated from the chair's vicinity. Horror held me captive as I watched the carpet fibers nearest the chair begin to yield. Indentations appeared, shaping themselves into footprints, pressing down, moving away from the chair towards the bed. Slow, measured, deliberate. The temperature plunged further. Adrenaline finally shattered the paralysis. I erupted from the bed, scrambling backward, colliding hard with the bathroom door behind me. My flailing hand slapped the wall, found the light switch. Click. Fluorescent glare bleached the room instantly. The advancing footprints halted, perhaps 3 feet from where my body had lain moments before. The chair stood vacant, yet the seat retained its subtle dip. Even as I watched, transfixed, the wood seemed to slowly, almost imperceptibly, regain its level shape. Rising, new footprints materialized, pacing towards the room's main door. They stopped. The handle turned with a quiet snick. The door eased open 6 inches, then swung gently shut. The handle rotated back. Stillness returned. I stood shaking, vibrating like a struck tuning fork, for what felt like an eternity. The clock showed only 10 minutes had passed. Eventually, limbs obeying a distant command, I moved. Snatched my bags from the floor. Didn't bother changing. Rammed my feet into my untied boots. The night clerk glanced up, momentarily dislodged from his digital world as I slammed the key fob onto the counter. "Leaving early?" His voice was flat and curious. "Yeah." My own voice was a dry rasp, a shrug, the universe contracting to the size of his indifference. "No refunds past midnight. Keep it." I shoved through the glass door, practically sprinted to the sanctuary of my cab. Dawn was bruising the eastern sky by the time I pulled into a brightly lit truck stop 50 miles down the highway. I nursed coffee in a booth, waiting for the tremors in my hand to subside enough to hold the mug without spilling. Rational explanations queued up in my head. Old furniture settles strangely, buildings groan, an overtired mind manufactures phantoms. But the cold clarity of the memory refused to yield. I knew what I saw. I knew what had been in that chair. I still run that route. The job demands it. But the Serenity Stop In is now just a landmark I accelerate past, eyes fixed forward. Mostly, its windows are dark voids, except once. Just the one time, passing late, I saw a light burning in 115. Through the flimsy curtains, stark against the glow, I could discern the silhouette of that wooden chair. And it was not empty. The days since have been punctuated by echoes. Cold patches blooming inexplicably in my cab for the next 100 miles. Glancing over at the passenger seat to find peculiar, fleeting depressions in the upholstery. Hearing phantom footsteps pace the length of my empty trailer during rest breaks. But those are threads of a different unease. Right now, this needed saying. About the chair. About room 115 at the Serenity Stop In. Lost in the rainy heart of a Missouri Tuesday night. Because tomorrow I have another delivery. The route mirrors the last, and checking the manifest tonight, a detail leapt out, cold and sharp, twisting my gut. The drop-off address, it's on the same desolate stretch of road as the inn, just 2 miles past it. A furniture wholesaler, expecting a shipment. of wooden chairs. That blasted looking glass. I never should have brought it home. The thought cycles endlessly as I sit huddled in the driver's seat, the familiar shape of my house looming beyond the windshield, now an alien and hostile facade. Going back inside feels impossible. My fingers tremble so violently that tapping this out on my phone screen is an exercise in frustration, each letter a victory against the tremor seizing my hands. But I have to record this now, while the terror is still sharp-edged, before the details blur into the shapeless dread consuming me. Someone has to know. Whether they believe it, whether they dismiss me as unhinged, it ceased to matter somewhere between the third floor and the front door. I just need the telling. It began 72 hours ago. A mundane afternoon, drifting past Silas's Curios on 4th, that dusty establishment wedged beside the husk of the old laundromat. No intention of stopping. I was merely eroding time before meeting my brother for lunch. Yet, something snagged my gaze. An imposing antique mirror dominating the cluttered window display. Its frame, carved from some dark, almost ebon wood, writhed with complex interlocking geometries. $85, the tag proclaimed. Absurdly low for a piece of such scale and apparent craftsmanship. Curiosity propelled me through the door, into an atmosphere thick with stale tobacco and the cloying sweetness of furniture wax. Silas hunched behind his counter, eyes glued to the flickering inanity of a game show on a miniature television. He offered barely a grunt when I inquired about the mirror. "Came in Tuesday," he mumbled, gaze fixed on the screen. "Fella clearing out his grand's place, passed away, needed the space, the cash." A flicker of unease should have sparked then. Why relinquish such an heirloom so cheaply? But the thought dissolved unspoken. My plastic was out, the transaction completed, arrangements made to collect it later with the truck. Wrangling it home proved an ordeal. The mirror possessed a deceptive, stone-like heft. Living alone in this 2-story house suddenly felt like a profound disadvantage. I hauled it upstairs, scraping flesh from my knuckles against the banister, finally wrestling it onto the bedroom wall. After 20 minutes of shuffling, I found the perfect position, directly opposite my bed, poised to catch the dawn's first light. That initial night passed undisturbed. The rituals of preparing for sleep unfolded as always. Teeth brushed, comfortable clothes donned, alarm dutifully set. I recall a fleeting glance towards the mirror as I passed, a moment of aesthetic satisfaction. It anchored the room, lent it a sense of depth, of completion. Sleep fractured around 3 a.m., a familiar call of nature pulling me from the depths. Groggy, senses muffled, I stumbled towards the bathroom. Returning, my reflection drifted across the mirror's surface. Even in my half-conscious state, a dissonance registered, subtle but insistent, like entering a familiar room rearranged by an unseen hand. I drew closer, rubbing sleep from my eyes, and then I saw it. The reflection depicted my nightstand, but upon it rested a glass of water. I never bring water to bed. A slow turn confirmed the reality. The actual nightstand stood bare. Whipping my head back to the mirror, the glass remained, stubbornly present in the reflected space, a cold fist clenched around my heart. "Just tired," I insisted internally. seeing phantoms. I scrambled back into bed, burrowing beneath the covers, eyes locked on the blank expanse of the ceiling until exhaustion finally claimed me. Morning light banished the night's unease. I dismissed the water glass as a figment of a dream-addled mind. The mirror, bathed in sunlight, seemed benign, inert. Dressing for work involved the usual reflexive checks in its surface, adjusting my collar, smoothing my hair, snatching my wallet from the dresser. My reflection mimicked every move with perfect fidelity. But the reprieve was temporary. That evening, the familiar routine of preparing for bed became a prelude to violation. I glanced into the mirror while fastening my watch and froze mid-motion. Someone stood behind me in the reflection. A woman, perhaps in her 60s, clad in a severe navy dress. She was simply there, positioned a few feet beyond my right shoulder, observing me with an unnerving, vacant stare. I pivoted with a violence that nearly sent me sprawling. The bedroom was empty. Utterly, undeniably empty. When my terrified gaze returned to the mirror, she was gone. My hands shook uncontrollably. A sheen of cold sweat slicked my back. Hesitantly, I approached the mirror, touching its surface. Cool, solid glass. Nothing more. I checked behind it, possessed by a frantic need for explanation. Hidden projectors? Some elaborate hoax? Finding only plaster and mounting brackets. Sleep became a battleground that night. Each drift towards unconsciousness was shattered by a jolt of adrenaline, the phantom sensation of being watched intensifying. I kept my back resolutely turned to the mirror. Near dawn, a fitful, shallow sleep finally offered escape. Work the following day was a fog of distraction. The woman's image superimposed itself onto spreadsheets. Her blank stare echoed in the faces of colleagues. Rational explanations warred in my mind. An optical illusion born of the mirror's angle, reflections bleeding in from the street lights. Perhaps the ancient wood itself was warping, subtly distorting the image. Or was it simply me? Stress, exhaustion, my own mind fabricating horrors. I almost achieved self-persuasion. Then I came home. The discrepancies began subtly, insidiously. In the mirror, my bedspread showed faint wrinkles, while the actual bed remained impeccably smooth. A paperback materialized on the reflected dresser, absent from the real one. Minor aberrations, easily dismissed, almost ignorable. Until I saw her again. The woman in the navy dress. Closer now, directly behind me, so near I imagined the phantom stir of her breath against my neck. In the reflection, her hand lifted, slowly, deliberately, reaching for my shoulder. I saw the minutiae, the liver spots mottling her skin, the thin gold band on her ring finger, the chipped crimson polish on her nails. I recoiled, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The room, of course, remained empty. Downstairs, I poured a stiff measure of whiskey. Then another. Fortified by alcohol, I eventually found the nerve to return to the bedroom, snatching a bedsheet and draping it over the mirror's face. A flimsy barrier against the impossible. I spent the night on the sofa, the television murmuring for company, but my thoughts remained tethered to the shrouded object upstairs. Was she still there, behind the cotton veil, waiting? This morning, resolve hardened by daylight, I forced myself back upstairs. I approached the shrouded mirror with trepidation, pulling the sheet away with a sharp tug. At first glance, normalcy. Just my own reflection staring back, pale, exhausted, bruised beneath the eyes. Then, a detail snagged my attention. In the reflected room behind me, the bedroom door was shut tight. In reality, it stood ajar. As I watched, paralyzed, the reflected door began to creak open, wider and wider. A hand appeared, gripping the edge. Long fingers, nails painted the same chipped crimson. I couldn't draw breath, couldn't tear my eyes away. The door in the mirror swung fully open, revealing her. But she wasn't alone this time. Behind her, spilling from the reflected hallway's Stygian darkness, emerged other figures. Indistinct shapes coalescing into forms, dozens of them, advancing towards me with a terrifyingly measured gait. In my actual room, the door remained unmoved. The hallway beyond, silent and empty. But in the glass, they pressed forward, their faces becoming clearer. Men, women, even children, all sharing the same vacant expression, arms outstretched, fingers grasping. I fled. Keys, phone, instinct took over. Out of the house, into the car. And so, here I sit. The tremors have subsided enough to type, the narrative spilling out in a desperate purge. Silas's words echo. Clearing out his grand's place, passed away. The urge to confront him, to demand answers, wars with the knowledge that his shop is shuttered, Sunday silence reigning on 4th Street. What now? Re-entry is unthinkable, not with that thing presiding over my bedroom, yet leaving it feels like a betrayal, a dangerous abdication. What if someone else stumbles upon it? A realtor showing the property? Curious neighbors? A child? My phone's lifeblood drains away. The sun bleeds orange and purple along the horizon. Hours have passed in this automotive vigil, watching my own home as if it were a predator's den. Courage remains elusive. Action is necessary. The sledgehammer leans against the garage wall. Perhaps shattering the glass is the only answer. But a new fear surfaces. What if breaking it doesn't end this, but unleashes it? What if the fragile boundary dissolves, allowing them passage? Someone ambles past with a dog, casting curious glances my way. I must appear mad, a man staring fixedly at his own house as twilight deepens. Streetlights flicker on, casting pools of sickly yellow. From this angle, I can see my bedroom window. Is it just nerves, or did a shadow ripple behind the curtain? I have to go back. I can't remain paralyzed here indefinitely. The plan forms, desperate and crude. Garage, sledgehammer, upstairs, smash the cursed thing before its inhabitants fully manifest. If this is the last entry, if silence follows, you'll know the shape of the end. Wait, no. The bedroom light just snapped on, visible through the window pane. I'm here, in the car. The only key rests heavy in my hand. The curtain twitches, parts. A figure stands framed in the window, wearing a dark blue dress. She's looking directly at me, and she is smiling. The engine coughs to life. Destination unknown, irrelevant. Anywhere but here. My gaze remains locked on the window, on her face, that predatory curve of her lips. She's raising a hand now, a slow, deliberate wave. I have to drive. If you find this message, avoid Silas's curios. Avoid antique mirrors with intricate frames. Avoid my house. And for God's sake, Be careful what you see when you look at yourself. You can never be entirely sure who or what is looking back. Message sent from mobile device 11:47 p.m. Location services unavailable. Battery 2%. Last connection 3 days prior. The memory crystallizes around the third hour past midnight, the absolute nadir of the night. I surfaced from sleep not gently, but snagged by a low, guttural resonance emanating from my bedroom wardrobe. Initially, a phantom of the hypnagogic state, I convinced myself. I levered myself upright, scrubbing the sleep grit from my eyes, and waited. Darkness draped the room, thick and familiar, yet the silhouette of the wardrobe door stood sharp against it, closed, utterly still. I held my breath, ears straining against the silence until the sound returned, a dull, abrasive friction, like ancient hinges protesting movement, though nothing visibly stirred. A protracted moment of listening, and then a new sensation. A subtle judder through the floorboards, resonating from the wardrobe itself. The door remained shut, yet it quivered faintly, as if something substantial pressed against it from within. My bare feet met the icy kiss of the floorboards, sending a shiver snaking up my spine. I crept towards the wardrobe, each step measured. My palm flattened against the cool wood, feeling the gentle, persistent tremor vibrating beneath my skin. I twisted the knob. Resistance. I applied more pressure, turning harder. With a soft, reluctant sigh of wood, the door yielded, swinging inward perhaps halfway. A breath of coldness met me, not merely an odor, but the stark sensation of frigid air entering my nostrils, making the skin across my cheekbones feel tight. I peered into the shadowed recess, nothing but skeletal hangers dangling from the metal rod. My few jackets, retrieved days ago, left it bare. No anomaly, just the vacant space, the hangers clustered to one side, yet the cold intensified, wrapping around my exposed face and arms like invisible gauze, coaxing involuntary shivers. It wasn't static cold either. It possessed a faint current, an almost imperceptible drift of air. Carefully, deliberately, I eased the door shut and retreated to the perceived safety of my bed. Sleep, however, proved elusive. I lay listening into the deepening silence, but the resonant groan did not return before dawn. The following night, I armed myself with denial. Sleep claimed me near midnight. The apartment settled into its usual quietude. I had ensured the wardrobe door was firmly latched. As an added, slightly absurd precaution, I'd wedged a heavy armchair against it, unsettled by the memory of its autonomous vibration. Hours swam by in slumber before the sound tore through the stillness once more. That same low moan, the creak of stressed timber, now accompanied by something new. A sibilant murmur, like static or hushed voices just beyond comprehension. My eyes snapped open. The chair stood sentinel, unmoved. The door remained closed behind it, yet the acoustic disturbance persisted. Shoving the chair aside with a scrape against the floor, I opened the door again. This time, I lingered. I reached inside, rattling the empty hangers. The chill was immediate, more pronounced than before and now undeniably mobile. A definite current. A slow exhalation from the wardrobe's depths flowed over my knuckles, my wrist, tracing a path up my arm like escaping vapor. I leaned my head into the opening, searching for vents, cracks, any plausible source. The back wall presented a smooth, unbroken surface. I rapped it sharply. Solid wood. My fingers probed behind the hangers, encountering only empty air. The frame seemed intact, the upper shelf vacant. All appeared maddeningly normal. Yet, standing perfectly still, I discerned the whispering more clearly. It wasn't in any language I recognized. The sounds were soft, fragmented, slurred, like trying to decipher speech through water. I pulled back abruptly, closing the door, a cold knot cinching tight in my stomach. A dampness bloomed beneath my arms despite the chill. I fought for composure, though my heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A trip to the bathroom, cold water splashed on my face, then back to bed, leaving the wardrobe sealed. I lay awake, staring into the darkness until morning painted the windows gray. Night after night, the phenomenon intensified. Always around the same Stygian hour, the wardrobe door would begin its subtle trembling, the wood groaning its low complaint, the sound scraping along my nerves. Opening it revealed the constant, empty hangers against the back panel. But the breeze never failed, cold and deliberate, brushing my face. The whispering gained a disturbing texture over time. Still unintelligible, yet distinct syllables emerged. Rough, parched sounds, as if spoken by a throat long deprived of moisture. There were no discernible pauses, just a continuous quiet susurrus that made my scalp prickle. I found myself retreating cautiously each time, unable to shake the primal fear that turning my back might invite something to reach out from the shadowed interior. Sleep became a forgotten luxury. Each night brought the same tense vigil, the same internal argument, a draft, faulty plumbing, frayed nerves, always refuted by the return of the sounds. After a week, I tried brute force. Heavy storage boxes, dragged and stacked. An old, defunct television stand wrestled into position, barricading the door. That night, the sounds filtered through regardless. The groan, the vibration, the whispering sigh. I remained in bed, rigid, breath held captive in my chest, muscles flickering between tension and release. Come morning, I dismantled my blockade. Inside the wardrobe, emptiness, a lingering coolness, but the daytime air was still. The breeze manifested only in darkness. A few nights later, exasperation finally eclipsed terror. I remember pacing the confines of my room, waiting. As the familiar resonance began, the door starting its slight shudder, I watched it from my bed, jaw locked tight. Enough. I would face it. Flicking on an overhead light, I strode across the room, seized the knob, and wrenched the door open. The cold air billowed out, a palpable wave striking my face, making my eyes water. The whispering surged, louder now, almost insistent. On impulse, I spoke into the void. "Hello?" My voice sounded thin, reedy. "Who's there?" Silence answered, save for the ceaseless alien murmuring. I leaned further in, arm outstretched, fingers brushing the back wall. Solid. Cold. I grasped the metal rod, shook it, firmly fixed. The floor beneath was unremarkable. I pressed against the side panels, unyielding. Yet the impossible breeze continued its caress, stirring the fine hairs at my temples. Minutes stretched into an eternity as I stood there, waiting for something. My legs felt leaden, shoulders hunched against an unseen weight. I listened intently. The whispering ebbed and flowed, a river of sound from behind a veil of ice. Weariness eventually won. I closed the door, but sleep remained impossible. The rest of the night was spent prowling the apartment, flipping lights on and off, opening windows to the indifferent city air, checking the hallway. Everywhere else was silent, normal. Only the wardrobe pulsed with its quiet anomaly. The following night heralded a new strategy. A small electric fan placed just inside the wardrobe, unplugged for now. My hypothesis: if something manipulated the air, perhaps it would react to an artificial current. I waited for the telltale groan. Opening the door, stomach clenching, I saw the fan undisturbed. The internal breeze flowed outward, meeting me as always. I plugged the fan into a nearby socket, switched it to its lowest setting, aimed it into the wardrobe's maw. The fan's gentle current pushed inwards. The wardrobe's glacial breath pushed outwards. Near my face, the two opposing forces met in a zone of confused turbulence. I stepped back. The whispering intensified, sharpened, taking on an irritated edge. It seemed acutely aware and displeased. I switched off the fan. The whispering subsided to its previous level. Heart pounding a heavy tattoo, I stared into the vacant dark. Next, a flashlight. Its beam sliced through the interior, illuminating the plain wood grain of the back wall. No cracks, no hidden grills. The ceiling panel was smooth, the floor continuous with my bedrooms. No source, no explanation for the breeze. The whispering persisted as long as the door stood open. "I don't understand you," I stated, feeling foolish. The murmuring continued, unperturbed. I reached inside again, fingers searching for a hidden latch, pressing every square inch of the back panel. Solid, utterly solid. Frustration gnawed at me, my jaw aching from unconscious tension. A new, unsettling thought surfaced. What if I tried to enter fully? The space was shallow, barely deep enough for coats, but what if? I removed the few remaining hangers, laying them on the bed. Standing before the open doorway, I took a breath and bent, easing my head and shoulders into the opening. The cold enveloped me instantly, raising goose flesh, muscles coiled tight across my back. The whispering was now directly in my ears, intimate and indecipherable. I pressed forward, anticipating the imminent contact of my forehead against the back wall. It didn't happen. My head kept going. A strange pressure clamped down on my shoulders as if the door frame itself were constricting, yet forward momentum continued. Darkness swallowed my vision. The flashlight, still clutched in my hand, beam pointing ahead, revealed only more empty black space. My pulse thundered in my ears, breath hitched, shallow. Ahead, only receding darkness, suggesting impossible depth. It defied logic. Fear surged, visceral and cold. I scrambled backward, stumbling out into the relative safety of my room. Standing upright, panting, I stared. The flashlight beam, directed back inside, showed the familiar back wall less than arm's length away. But, leaning in, the space yielded. I needed to try again, but with a lifeline. Rummaging through the apartment yielded an extension cord. I secured one end firmly around the leg of my heavy bed frame, looped the other around my waist, knotting it tight. My palms were slick, my shirt clinging damply to my back. A suffocating weight pressed upon my sternum, the feeling of imminent transgression. I opened the wardrobe door. The whispering greeted me like an old, unwelcome acquaintance. The cold air rushed forth. This time I stepped fully inside, ducking beneath the frame. Slowly, flashlight beam preceding me, I advanced. 1 step, 2. Logic dictated I should have reached the back. Instead, I took several more paces into an echoing void. The whispering seemed to swirl now, directionless, emanating from everywhere at once. My own breathing sounded loud, amplified. I tapped the floor with my foot. Solid, smooth, cold, like polished stone, not wood. Bending, I touched it. Frigid. The air held no scent, not mustiness nor decay, just profound cold and emptiness. I glanced back. The bedroom doorway glowed reassuringly. My lamp, the corner of my bed, a portal back to the known. Turning forward again, I advanced deeper into the black. The flashlight beam attenuated rapidly, swallowed by the immensity. My spine tingled. My mouth was desert dry. "Hello?" I tried again. "I can't understand." The whispering flowed on, unchanged. No objects materialized in the light, no textures, just endless dark. After perhaps 10 paces from the threshold, I felt a new resistance, like walking into an invisible funnel. The space seemed to narrow, pressing in on my shoulders and chest. Movement became difficult. My head felt heavy, limbs sluggish. Raising my arms required conscious effort. The whispering swelled, louder, more insistent, resonating within my skull. My heartbeat pulsed in my fingertips. I aimed the light upwards. Only blackness. Reaching out to the sides, my hands met smooth, cool surfaces that seemed to curve inwards, constricting the path. Panic flared. The sudden, terrifying certainty of being trapped, consumed. I turned, stumbling back towards the rectangle of light. Each retreating step lessened the pressure, eased the constriction. Then, abruptly, I was through, emerging back into the familiar confines of my bedroom. I spun around. The wardrobe stood as it always had. Small, wooden, innocuous, containing nothing but a metal rod. For hours, I sat on the edge of my bed, facing the closed wardrobe door, forcing measured breaths. The sweat dried cold on my skin. I switched on every light in the apartment, bathing the room in harsh, artificial daylight. The whispering seemed fainter in the brightness, but listening closely revealed its tenacious presence behind the door. Eventually, I rose and approached it one last time. The air near the door remained chilled. Leaning close, the faint susurrus was still audible. I didn't open it fully. I didn't venture inside again. I simply stood there, feeling the impossible draft, my hands trembling uncontrollably. The next day was spent deliberately away. Work, then lingering afterwards, postponing the inevitable return. A hotel room beckoned, attempting escape, but I resisted. I arrived back near midnight, pointedly ignoring the wardrobe as I prepared for bed. Lying stiffly, eyes fixed on the ceiling, I waited. Around 3, it began. The low, resonant groan, seemingly louder tonight, more resonant. I sat bolt upright, watching the door panel vibrate. Tendrils of cold air seeped visibly like smoke through the narrow cracks around the frame. The whispering was a constant hum beneath the groan. My heart rate surged, my throat constricting. I forced myself out of bed, stood before the wardrobe. My hand rested on the knob, feeling its faint, rhythmic tremor. Turning it, I eased the door open just a fraction. The blast of frigid air was immediate, stinging my eyes. The whispering flooded out, insistent, almost pleading, a siren call to the impossible space within. I stepped back decisively. Turning my back on it, I climbed into bed, pulling the covers high. The sounds continued unabated for hours, a dissonant symphony in the dark. Sleep was unthinkable. The following night mirrored the last. The wardrobe persisted, calling with its unintelligible voice and its unfathomable cold. I did not answer. I did not enter. The consequences of that deeper passage remained terrifyingly unknown. I simply endured, waiting for morning, listening to the alien murmurs, feeling the draft that defied physics, watching the door tremble in the darkness until the first fragile light of dawn crept through the blinds, offering a temporary, uneasy truce. My hands clamped the wheel, knuckles blanching under the strain, as the rental car's beams sliced into a blackness so absolute it felt tangible, pressing against the windshield. Hours I'd navigated this vein of a back road, the pavement having surrendered miles ago to fissured gravel. My phone's navigation, a dead screen for the better part of an hour. No signal, no comforting glow street lights, no landmarks, only the rasp of my own breathing and the gaunt silhouettes of ancient wooden fences leaning roadside, skeletal fingers seeming to scratch at the passing glass. Business called me here, a contract needing signature in some forgotten factory town. I'd sworn to my family, back by the weekend. Now, midnight had long bled away, the highway remained elusive, and a constriction tightened in my chest, as if the night itself were squeezing the air from my lungs. A bead of perspiration traced a cold path down my temple, mocking the cool air. Stopping earlier, finding refuge in the last town's motel. That was the sensible path forsaken for the gambler's choice of saving time. A fool's errand. Every fiber of my being screamed dissonance. I eased off the accelerator, eyes straining to pierce the veil just beyond the headlight's reach. And then, nestled to the right, a density appeared. A huddle of time-worn structures, their roof lines jagged against the starless void. I coasted to a stop, the engine settling into a low thrum. Too substantial for a lone farmstead, this place, a village, exhaled abandonment. Weathered houses stood sentinel, their window eyes either boarded blind or vacant sockets. An inn sign, warped and illegible, sagged nearby. The silence outside wasn't empty. It was heavy, expectant. I cut the engine. The world shrank to the frantic percussion of my own heart. Emerging onto the loose shale, the crunch of my footsteps felt offensively loud. Hello? The sound of my voice, thin and brittle, was swallowed whole. The ground pitched unevenly beneath me. A protesting groan escaped a dilapidated gate as I pushed it inward, stepping onto what might once have been a central square. My flashlight beam, a trembling wand, danced across warped doors and flaking paint. The architecture felt displaced in time, echoes of a century-long past. Dust lay thick as velvet, cobwebs draped corners like funereal bunting. The air hung stale, redolent of old timber and dormant mold. My throat felt like sandpaper. I tried a door handle, immovable. Another yielded with a protracted groan, revealing a shadowed corridor and a forsaken parlor. Hesitantly, I crossed the threshold, each footfall stirring dormant dust motes into a frantic ballet within the light's cone. Furniture remained. A table draped in decaying lace, a sofa whose upholstery gaped open, and opposite me, an oval mirror held in a fractured frame. Its surface was obscured by grime, the glass darkened like a clouded eye. Looking at myself now, in this place, felt profoundly unwise. My light swept the room. A prickling sensation crawled up the nape of my neck, the unmistakable feeling of observation. Yet emptiness reigned. No footprints marred the dust, no sign of recent passage. The oppressive silence became unbearable. "Anyone here?" I whispered, the question absorbed instantly by the house's hollow core. That's when I heard it. The delicate, distinct ring of a small bell somewhere outside. I froze, mouth suddenly arid. Back out onto the uneven street I stepped. The bell sounded again, joined by a second, its tone higher, sharper. The source seemed further down the row of skeletal houses. Heart hammering against my ribs, I followed the sound. Rounding a dilapidated corner, I entered a narrow alley. There, tethered by frayed rope to a listed wooden post, hung a bell. No wires, no breeze sufficient to stir it, yet it swayed almost imperceptibly. Its chime was soft, almost melodic, but each note feathered a chill along my spine. Further on, another bell came into view, perched incongruously within a chimney stack like some bizarre metallic bird. It answered the first with a different pitch. More bells materialized as I ventured deeper, one dangling from a window latch, another tucked beneath a porch overhang, a third mounted on a twisted iron hook behind sealed shutters. Each sang in sequence, a scattered choir of metallic whispers across the dead village. A fine tremor started in my hands. My stomach clenched. It felt undeniably like communication, a network of chimes discussing the intruder. Restlessness gnawed at me. I needed answers. A prank? Some antiquated alarm system? Rationality fought a losing battle against the profound wrongness, the utter absence of human presence juxtaposed with this persistent, ethereal ringing. I selected a larger building, a 2-story edifice with a crooked board that might once have proclaimed mercantile, and slipped inside. The air within was thick with dampness. I navigated over toppled shelving. On a counter lay an old ledger, its pages brittle, yellowed parchment. The script was cramped, nearly indecipherable, but dates from decades past were visible. Then, abruptly, the entries ceased. No explanation, no mention of departure, just a final, hurried scrawl followed by accusingly blank pages. Outside, the concert continued, some bells tinkling faintly, others emitting deep, resonant tones. Seeking respite, I found a back room containing a simple cot. I sank onto it, my back pressed against the damp, cool wall, my legs unsteady. My throat burned, and I took a tentative sip from my water bottle, my hand shaking. The urge to flee, to scramble back to the car and drive blindly away, warred with an unnerving pull, a sense that the bells held a secret I was meant to decipher before I could leave. Forcing myself back into the night air, I consulted my watch. Nearly 2. A sliver of moon had risen, casting a frail, skeletal light upon the rooftops. The bells had grown quieter, their voices now dispersed throughout the village, a subtle, pervasive network. I imagined them hanging in every shadowed corner, behind locked doors, secreted in attics and chimney flues, affixed to lampposts devoid of lamps, hidden in plain sight. Passing another house, a sudden gust of wind, from nowhere, whipped dust into my eyes. I rubbed them, coughing, blinking away tears. Through the watery blur, I saw it. Through a half-open doorway, leaning against a hallway wall, stood a tall mirror. This one was different. Larger, encased in a heavy wooden frame intricately carved with coiling vines. Its presence exerted a strange magnetism. I slipped inside, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Dust filmed the glass, yet my own silhouette was discernible. Stepping closer, I raised a trembling hand, wiping a small circle clean with my sleeve. My own eyes stared back, wide with apprehension. In that precise instant, a single bell chimed, soft, intimate, almost a whisper against my ear. I spun around, light slashing across the vacant room. Nothing. But the bell called again, seemingly from above. Moving into what might have been a kitchen, I found it. A minuscule bell hanging from a corner cabinet hook. It was impossibly small, yet its voice resonated clearly, like a gentle finger tapping on glass. Immediately, as if summoned, other bells answered from outside, their tones overlapping, cascading down empty lanes and through unseen corridors, swelling into an intricate, unsettling dialogue. My pulse surged. I retreated, backing towards the hall mirror. My reflection swam into view again. For a sliver of a second, an impossible impression. Someone stood behind me in the glass, a mere shape defined by hollow eyes. A frantic turn revealed only empty space. My skin crawled. Exhaustion frayed my nerves. The bells persisted, and now, delusionally perhaps, I began to hear my name woven into their metallic voices. Eliz, Eliz, drawn out, fragmented across the octaves. My breathing grew shallow, rapid. Sweat trickled coldly down my spine. Escape. Find the car. Drive until the tank ran dry. Anything to silence these chimes. I bolted from the house, back onto the street. In my haste, my foot caught on a broken flagstone. I fell hard, palms scraping raw against the grit. The sharp pain offered a fleeting anchor to reality. Above, the sky felt immense, the silence between bell notes pregnant. I pushed myself up, walking fast, then breaking into a run. Around me, the bells seemed to quicken their pace, not frantically, but with a complex, unreadable rhythm. I dodged behind what looked like a stable, nearly colliding with another bell impaled on an old pitchfork driven into the earth. Desperate, I ducked into a structure resembling a general store, seeking anything, a tool, cloth, some way to block the incessant sound. Inside, amidst the debris, I found a stack of dusty canvas aprons. I seized one, wrapping it clumsily around my head, muffling the chimes to a dull thrum. I panted, air searing my lungs. Through the grimy window pane, I caught my reflection. The apron looked absurd, but something else snagged my attention. The reflection of the doorway behind me seemed subtly distorted, the wood rippling, and within that ripple, for a heartbeat, I saw eyes, not my own, staring out from the glass. I whirled around. Just a door, solid, empty. A deep, resonant clang echoed from the village square. Tearing the apron from my head, I followed the sound, propelled by a mixture of terror and desperate curiosity. At the heart of this silent place stood a tall, weathered pole crowned by a large bell. It dwarfed the others, heavy, ancient, perhaps salvaged from a long-vanished church. My legs felt like lead as I approached. Behind me, a distinct sense of movement, a shifting in the shadows. When I turned, only darkness greeted me. Then, the bells, large and small, began to chime anew. Slower now, their voices layering into a low, resonant hum that vibrated deep within my chest, my own heartbeat falling into sync. The feeling of being watched intensified. 1,000 unseen eyes peering from behind shutters, from darkened eaves. My skin prickled, alive with phantom sensations. Drawing a ragged breath, I knew my only recourse was retreat. I stumbled back along the main thoroughfare, past the silent houses and their blind doorways, the chorus of bells gradually receding with each step. Finally, the blessed shape of my car materialized. Relief washed over me, potent as cool water on scorched skin. I slid behind the wheel, hands shaking violently, and twisted the key. The engine roared to life, headlights flaring, illuminating a sign at the village entrance I hadn't registered before. In the reflective surface of the windshield, now feeling unnervingly like another mirror, I caught a fleeting glimpse of something pale flickering between the houses in the distance. The bells offered one final collective chime, my name, unmistakably this time, and then fell silent. I slammed the accelerator, the car lurching forward, its sound tearing the unnatural quiet. I did not look back. Once I found pavement again, the shaking in my hands refused to subside. A tightness lingered in my chest, accompanied by a faint buzzing in my ears that the rushing wind couldn't erase. My eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see pursuit. A shadowed figure, a disembodied bell, a distorted face coalescing in the darkness. But there was nothing, only the indelible memory of that haunted village, the symphony of chimes, and the persistent sensation of invisible eyes having tracked my every move. Dawn found me pulling into the fluorescent glare of a roadside diner. Inside, the clatter of cutlery and the aroma of brewing coffee felt jarringly alien after the night's ordeal. In the restroom, I splashed cold water onto my face, the shock momentarily steadying me. Then I looked up, meeting my own gaze in the mirror above the sink. For an infinitesimal moment, I thought I heard it, the faintest echo of a chime. My reflection seemed to waver, or perhaps it was just exhaustion playing tricks. Yet the conviction remained, cold and certain. The village, and whatever resided within its ringing silence, was not yet finished with Elias. The memory hummed just beneath the threshold of hearing, a spectral resonance waiting patiently for the right moment to call my name again. An unnerving prickle traced Elias's vertebrae the moment his boots met the asphalt of the forsaken lane. Gloom pooled thick here, barely disturbed by the spasmodic blink of skeletal street lamps. Exhaustion weighed him down, a physical ache demanding the solace of home. Then, perched on the corner, a two-story silhouette materialized, its windows gaping like vacant eyes. From within drifted the spectral strains of some antiquated melody, thin and crackling as old parchment. No welcoming light softened the interior darkness, yet an inexplicable magnetism drew him closer. Perhaps, he reasoned against his better judgment, an occupant could offer a swifter path through this nocturnal labyrinth. The first tread upon the listing porch confirmed the folly. Timbers groaned a protest beneath his weight. Fissure lines webbed the steps ascending to the shadowed door. Testing the initial riser, Elias's right foot plunged through rotten wood, loosing a puff of acrid dust that stung his eyes. He choked, snatching at a balustrade that wobbled precariously in his grasp. A frantic pulse hammered at his temples. The music persisted, a dragging, distorted lament now, like a phonograph winding down to silence. Through the black rectangles in the windows, only void stared back. The door itself, canted inward slightly, shed flakes of desiccated paint onto the porch floor. Elias nudged it wider. Its hinges emitted a drawn-out metallic shriek, a sound of long-neglected things. Scarcely had he crossed the threshold when an unseen exhalation swept past him, cold and sudden. The heavy door crashed shut behind, the sound reverberating like a gunshot in the enclosed space. Elias's heart seized. He spun, wrestling the inert handle, but the portal remained resolutely sealed. He found himself marooned in a murky vestibule. Floorboards whined beneath his boots before one gave way with a sickening splintering sound. He recoiled just as the plank fractured, his leg plunging knee-deep into the darkness below before he wrenched it free, breath rasping in his throat. The air hung thick with the miasma of stagnant time and decomposing timber. That spectral melody, louder now, seemed to emanate not from a single source but to bleed from the very walls, a ubiquitous, disorienting threnody. Elias forced measured breaths, attempting to quell the rising panic. He proceeded with excruciating caution, probing each floorboard before trusting it with his full weight, hugging the periphery where the structure felt marginally more sound. A tremor afflicted his hands. Perspiration trickled cold against his skin, plastering his shirt to his back. Escape became the imperative, a rear exit, a breach-able window. Yet the apertures nearest the entrance, those gaping portals viewed from the street, were now revealed to be crudely boarded from within, mocking his memory. He ventured further into the dwelling's gullet, guided by slivers of lunar luminescence piercing the decrepitude. His own tread returned to him unnaturally amplified, suggesting dimensions far exceeding the visible. Phantom susurrations brushed the edge of his hearing, always seeming to originate just over his shoulder. Each swift turn revealed only the receding corridor, swallowed by shadow. The chilling possibility of nocturnal internment began to crystallize in his mind. Deeper within, the music swelled, resolving into a grating, violin-like scraping underscored by a subterranean organ drone. It cycled relentlessly, a short, maddening loop devoid of variation, fraying Elias's already taut nerves. His fists clenched and unclenched involuntarily, his body coiled in primal vigilance. Ahead, a staircase yawned, ascending into deeper obscurity. Its banister showed gaps like missing teeth. The treads themselves appeared warped and treacherous. Halting at its foot, Elias strained his ears. A new sound overlaid the music. Voices. Not conversation, but a rhythmic, polyphonic murmuring. Unintelligible syllables woven into a dense tapestry of sound. It seemed less spoken than emanated. A collective hum vibrating in the air. A prickle crawled across his scalp. His respiration quickened. An intuition, perhaps born of desperation, insisted the music's heart lay above. Elias committed his weight to the first step. It answered with a protracted groan. He ascended, clinging to the coarse, splinter-ridden handrail, each riser protesting with varying degrees of complaint, vibrations traveling up his unsteady legs. His mouth felt arid, coated with the taste of airborne decay. The summit opened onto a long corridor flanked by closed doors, terminating in a solitary window that admitted a ribbon of wan moonlight. The chanting was sharper here, emanating from further down the passage, perhaps from behind one of the silent doors. The ceaseless musical loop persisted, now imbued with a sickening, wavering quality. Elias's own pulse throbbed against his eardrums. He approached the nearest door on the right. The metal knob felt unnaturally frigid beneath his palm. Turning it cautiously, he nudged the door inward with his boot. Hinges whined. The music momentarily intensified, then receded. Within lay darkness, punctuated by the skeletal forms of broken furniture. Elias stepped inside, activating the flashlight retrieved from his pack. Its beam sliced through the gloom, illuminating dust-shrouded chairs, a three-legged table, and funereal draperies of cobwebs. Then, a distinct creak from the hallway floorboards behind him. He whirled, flashlight beam stabbing the emptiness. Nothing. Only the frantic hammering of his own heart against his ribs. Retreating from the desolate room, Elias continued his exploration. The second door resisted, securely locked. The third yielded, opening into a cramped chamber reeking of damp plaster. A single window, cracked a finger's width, offered a tantalizing glimpse of the outside. He strained against it, desperate for egress, putting his shoulder into the effort, but the frame held fast, budging only infinitesimally. The chanting surged, suddenly intimate, raising the hairs on his neck. Defeated, he returned to the corridor. Now, a disturbing optical illusion plagued him. As he advanced toward the final door at the corridor's terminus, the distance seemed to warp, elongating impossibly. One moment, sanctuary felt mere steps away. The next, it receded like a mirage. He pressed onward, yet the door remained stubbornly remote. His flashlight sputtered, requiring a sharp rap to restore its beam. A low tremor ran through the floor beneath him, a subterranean shudder, as if the house itself were drawing a breath. The floorboards groaned more ominously with every footfall, threatening imminent collapse. His knees turned to water. At long last, he stood before the final door on the left. Pressing his ear to the wood, he found the music strangely muted, yet the chanting was starkly clear, a litany of nonsensical phonemes. Heat flushed his face, sweat beaded on his brow. He pushed the door inward. A vast, barren room unfolded before him. Wide floor planks lay exposed, strewn with dust and detritus. Across the expanse, tall windows stood open to the night, bathing the room in the spectral moonlight. Elias entered, his flashlight beam sweeping the emptiness. His footsteps resonated strangely. More unnerving still, when he halted, the echoes of his steps persisted, multiplying, overlapping, phantom footfalls trailing in his wake. His chest constricted. He spun, flashlight probing the shadows. Vacancy. Only the dying susurrus of those impossible echoes remained. Abruptly, the chanting swelled, ricocheting off the bare walls before abruptly ceasing. Silence descended, thick and expectant. Elias stood rigid, breath held captive. Then his light snagged on a detail at the room's far end. A doorway, partially obscured by a ragged curtain crudely affixed to the wall. Simultaneously, the music recommenced, its source now seemingly subterranean, vibrations tingling through the soles of his shoes. He traversed the room, navigating islands of debris and peeling wallpaper fragments. The concealed door yielded to his push, revealing another passage, narrower this time. The air here was palpably damp, carrying the cloying scent of mildew. The chanting resumed its disorienting ebb and flow. Elias's legs felt leaden. Breathing became a conscious effort. Elias navigated the constricted passage, his light playing over fractured plaster that revealed glimpses of the lath skeleton beneath. A door on the right resisted his initial turn of the knob, then sprang open violently when he applied more force. It gave onto a small storeroom, its walls lined with mostly vacant shelves. A few dusty glass jars contained desiccated remnants, herbs, perhaps, or leaves. He averted his gaze, repelled by a concentrated wave of the musty odor that threatened to gag him. He pulled the door shut and continued. The corridor terminated abruptly at a descending stairwell. These steps appeared more substantial than the treacherous flight he'd previously climbed, though darkness veiled their lower reaches. The music, undeniably, originated from below, as did the intensifying chant. The impulse to retreat warred with the knowledge of the sealed front door. Perhaps salvation lay downward, in some forgotten cellar exit. With each downward step, the temperature plummeted. Gooseflesh pebbled Elias's skin. A shiver traced his spine. His own breathing sounded unnaturally loud in the enclosed stairwell. He gripped the slick, cold railing, flashlight beam probing the Stygian depths. The stairs deposited him onto a level previously unseen from the exterior, a subterranean stratum. Stone flagged the floor, hissing softly under his boots. Walls of bare concrete, weeping moisture and sporting patches of viridian moss enclosed him. The rhythmic plink of dripping water punctuated the oppressive quiet. The chanting swelled, seemingly poised just beyond the next turn. A knot tightened in Elias's stomach. His shoulders radiated tension. Every instinct screamed against rounding that corner, yet immobility felt like a slower surrender. He forced himself forward. The passage opened into an elongated chamber, perhaps once a cellar workshop or storage vault. Rough-hewn tables hugged the walls, their surfaces bearing cryptic stains. Distant shelves stood barren save for scattered paper scraps, and there, positioned centrally, stood an antique gramophone, its large brass horn gleaming dully in his flashlight's beam. A grimy disc revolved on its platter, stylus tracing the groove that birthed the distorted, looping melody. The horn aimed toward a corner, creating peculiar acoustics. The chanting seemed omnipresent now, a disembodied chorus with no discernible origin point. The record spun on, relentlessly repeating its lament. Elias's throat constricted. Elias approached the archaic machine, kneeling beside it. The vinyl disc was deeply scored, coated in grime. He extended a hesitant hand toward the tone arm. The instant his fingers made contact, the chanting erupted, a deafening, multi-voiced shriek that assaulted his senses, seeming to bore directly into his skull. He staggered backward, flashlight nearly slipping from his grasp, ears ringing violently. In the periphery of his vision, shadows writhed along the concrete walls, imbued with unnatural motion. He swept the light beam frantically, seeking a source, a presence. Nothing. Only the relentless sonic barrage that hammered at his consciousness, impeding thought. He clamped his hands over his ears, squeezing his eyes shut against the onslaught, heart battering his ribs. He fought for breath. After an agonizing eternity, the cacophony subsided, receding once more to a sibilant murmur. Elias opened his eyes, gaze fixed on the gramophone. The record still turned, the needle caught in its endless loop. Steeling himself, he reached out again, carefully lifting the tone arm and securing it on its rest. The music died. Profound silence descended, broken only by the persistent drip of water. Elias remained frozen, scarcely breathing, anticipating something. His flashlight flickered erratically before stabilizing. The imperative to flee surged through him. Turning from the silent gramophone, His gaze swept the chamber, seeking egress. A single door stood opposite. He hastened toward it, beam dancing ahead, revealing hazards. A discarded chain coiled on the stone, a depression where the floor had partially subsided. Skirting the debris, he grasped the handle. The door opened onto a cramped tunnel. The walls felt rough-hewn. A draft of cool, clean air whispered from the darkness ahead. He slipped through, pulling the door shut behind him. The chanting felt muffled now, distant, trapped within the house's core. The tunnel angled slightly upward. Ahead, a pale luminescence beckoned. Moonlight, an aperture to the world outside. Relief eased the constriction in his chest. He broke into a stumbling run, adrenaline lending speed to his exhausted limbs. The passage culminated in a low, fractured doorway, its frame splintered. Crouching, Elias squeezed through and found himself ejected into the overgrown backyard of the house. Weeds clawed at his trousers. A dilapidated fence sagged nearby. The crisp night air was a balm on his face. He inhaled deeply, greedily. Above, a scattering of stars glittered in the clear, moonlit sky. Tremors still racked his frame, but the overwhelming sensation was one of deliverance. Elias scrambled away from the malevolent structure, tripping through tangled weeds and over scattered, decaying timbers. He found a breach in the decrepit fence and squeezed through, emerging back onto the desolate street, further down now, near another crossing. Behind him, the house stood monolithic, somehow darker, more forbidding than before. He noted with a jolt that its windows, those vacant eyes that had lured him in, were now sealed tight, blind to the night. He paused on the cracked pavement, gasping for air, his pulse a frantic drum against his ribs, shirt clinging damply to his skin. Fragments of the ordeal flashed through his mind. The impossible echoes, the shrieking voices, the floor yielding beneath him. His throat felt scraped raw. Thirst clawed at him. He needed distance, sanctuary. The house remained utterly still, expelling no sound, no sign of the life, however perverse, it had contained moments before. He retreated backward, gaze locked on the impassive facade, then turned and forced himself into a rapid walk, resisting the urge to look over his shoulder. His legs felt like unreliable stilts. Several blocks onward, the street lights regained their strength, illuminating the welcome beacon of a distant gas station sign. He didn't slacken his pace until he stood under its fluorescent glare. The attendant glanced up, face impassive, but eyes questioning Elias's disheveled, sweat-soaked appearance. Elias ignored the unspoken query, seizing a bottle of water and retreating back into the night. He drank deeply, leaning against the cool brick, the plastic bottle trembling in his grasp. He noticed then the angry red lines on his palm, studded with splinters from the treacherous banister. Dust and filth coated his clothes like a shroud. He consciously slowed his breathing, anchoring himself to the mundane reality of the gas station, the hum of the pumps, the drone of traffic on a nearby thoroughfare. No spectral music, no insidious chanting, just the cool night air and the certainty that he was free. Yet the experience clung to him, undeniable. The voices, the collapsing floor, the spinning record, inexplicable, terrifyingly real. The only desire left was for home, for locked doors and the oblivion of sleep. Who chanted? How did the corridor warp? Why were the windows traversable from without, but barred from within? Questions without answers, overshadowed by the chilling conviction that the house had sought to claim him. He hasn't returned. He sometimes traverses the periphery of that neighborhood, but the specific street remains forbidden territory. Driving past, he never seems to pinpoint the house again. Perhaps an error of location, perhaps the concealing darkness, perhaps something else entirely. A residual disquiet haunts him near that area, a persistent sensation of being observed. The memory of the phantom footfalls, the roar of the unseen chorus, these refuse to fade. He rarely speaks of it. The tale strains credulity, but its truth is etched into his psyche. He will never again set foot near that place. Avoidance is his only recourse. Let the house remain, if it still stands, a silent monument to his terror. He is finished with shadowed shortcuts and the lure of the unknown. No matter the fatigue, the circuitous route home is now the only path he will tread. The skeletal weight of the key pressed into Elias's palm as he lingered by the rusted front gate. Late afternoon sun slanted low, casting long shadows, and a profound stillness clung to the property, tightening the muscles at the nape of his neck. He was heir to this place, bequeathed by a kinsman utterly unknown to him, notified only by a terse letter proclaiming him the final descendant eligible for ownership. Excitement hadn't been his first reaction. It felt more like a burden dropped unexpectedly into his lap. Yet, standing here, seeing the house materialize from the overgrown drive, its paint flaking like sunburnt skin, its porch timbers bowed with age, shifted something within him. It was undeniably old, yet possessed a stubborn spine, evident in its tall, dark windows and the imposing front door crowned with a verdigris-stained handle. An odd sense of significance emanated from it, as if the structure itself had been anticipating his arrival. He mounted the groaning porch steps, the key grating reluctantly in the lock before yielding. Inside, the air was thick, a palpable entity composed of dust and decades of stillness. A reflexive cough escaped him as his eyes adjusted. The entryway held sparse, spectral furniture, a threadbare divan, a slight wooden table, a few chairs scattered like forgotten thoughts. Dropping his duffel onto the table, Elias began a slow perambulation through the ground floor, flicking light switches. Most sputtered to life, casting a weak, jaundiced glow that did little to dispel the gloom. Beneath his worn boots, the floorboards uttered long, complaining sighs. Each new door opened felt like tempting fate, bracing him for something unseen to leap from the shadows. Nothing did, yet a knot of apprehension remained coiled tight in his gut. Room by room, he assessed the neglect. The kitchen housed relics, a hulking, ancient refrigerator, and a stove that might have witnessed the mid-century. He twisted a faucet. Water coughed and spat before settling into a hesitant, steady flow. It smelled clean enough. The well system miraculously endured. A cramped closet near the back door yielded a pair of spectral coats on wooden hangers, one with a mangled zipper, the other rent deeply at the shoulder, garments seemingly suspended in waiting through countless lightless years. He located the ground floor bedroom. A vast bedstead dominated the space, alongside a dresser whose mirror showed a spiderweb of cracks across its silvered surface. A film of dust lay thick upon a faded rug. Tapping it with his foot sent motes swirling in the stagnant air. As he stooped to lift a corner, intending to shake it clean, His gaze snagged on something beneath, a heavy trap door set flush into the floorboards. Its construction looked formidable. Broad iron hinges, a thick ring pull. His pulse gave a sudden hard kick against his ribs. He grasped the handle, pulling. It refused to yield. Again, he strained, leveraging his weight, but it remained stubbornly sealed. Crouching lower, he spotted the impediment. A hefty padlock, rusted but undeniably solid, clamped through a loop affixed to the door's edge. That was when the first true chill permeated the room. The air seemed to thin and cool perceptibly, accompanied by an odd pressure building within his chest. He straightened, drawing deliberate breaths, attempting to dismiss the sensation. Yet his eyes kept returning to the trap door. It promised a cellar, a basement. Logically, it had to. But this felt different from any ordinary locked space. A sense of profound wrongness emanated from it. He resolved to survey the rest of the house before confronting this subterranean mystery again. The upper floor revealed 3 additional chambers. One stood utterly vacant, save for a solitary wooden chair marooned in a corner. Another overflowed with cardboard sarcophagi brimming with brittle newspapers, yellowed books, and forgotten magazines. The last contained only a stark iron bed frame and a small, scarred dresser. None of these rooms pulsed with the same peculiar energy as the bedroom below. Yet his thoughts invariably circled back to the locked portal in its floor. As twilight began to bleed across the sky, Elias realized hunger gnawed at him. He hadn't eaten since morning. Rummaging in his duffel produced a pair of dense protein bars. He sought the back porch, stepping out into the cooling air. It overlooked a ragged field of tall, whispering grass that dissolved into a dark tree line. The silence here was absolute, unnerving. No birdsong, no rustle of unseen creatures. It felt curated, unnatural. He chewed and swallowed the bars mechanically, their taste lost on him. His mind remained tethered to the locked door below. Returning indoors, he established a makeshift camp in the living room, unfolding a small cot near a window. The bedroom with the trapdoor radiated an unease he couldn't tolerate, and the massive, dusty bed held no appeal. The living room felt neutral, less saturated with unseen tensions. He extinguished most lights, leaving only a small lamp casting soft shadows near the divan. Exhaustion pressed down, yet sleep remained elusive, his eyes refusing to stay closed. Perhaps an hour crawled by before he heard it, a faint, intermittent scratching, so soft at first, like fingernails brushing against dry wood. He sat bolt upright, heart hammering, straining to pinpoint the source. It seemed to emanate from beneath the floorboards. Every fine hair on his arms lifted. He rose, moving stealthily towards the bedroom that held the trap door. As he approached, the scratching ceased. He stood frozen in the hallway, listening intently, but only the house's deep silence answered. His heart thrummed violently, his stomach clenched. Reaching for the bedroom doorknob, he felt its icy touch seep into his palm. Slowly, cautiously, he pushed the door inward. The lamp's glow from the living room stretched far enough to illuminate most of the floor. The trap door lay undisturbed, locked, and silent. He waited, breath held captive in his lungs, but the sound did not resume. He lingered for a minute, maybe 2, wrestling with the urge to force the lock then and there. Ultimately, the darkness dissuaded him. Morning would be soon enough. Retreating to the cot, he attempted sleep once more. this time leaving his boots laced taut, a concession to a primal need for readiness. His thoughts became a loop, replaying the image of the trap door, the feel of the rusted padlock. A visceral twist accompanied every imagined scenario of opening it. Eventually, fatigue claimed him, dragging him into a shallow, restless slumber punctuated by fleeting, formless nightmares. Each time he surfaced, the house was utterly still, yet it seemed to possess a slow, quiet respiration all its own. Dawn filtered grayly through the grimy window panes, finding Elias with gritty eyes and a dull ache behind his temples. He stretched, rubbed the sleep from his face, and decided a trip into the nearest town for sustenance was essential. Grabbing his keys, he locked the imposing front door behind him and navigated the rutted dirt track until he located a small, unassuming diner. The bacon and eggs were greasy, functional fuel. The strong, bitter coffee helped sharpen his frayed nerves. Afterwards, he procured basic groceries and, crucially, stopped at a hardware store. A pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters joined his supplies, the purchase sending a fresh wave of tightness through his chest. The thought of confronting the lock was daunting, but the curiosity had become an insistent, burning thing. Back at the silent house, he made a direct line for the bedroom. His footsteps seemed unnaturally loud in the hallway's echo chamber. Kneeling beside the trap door, he examined the padlock more closely. Thick, corroded iron, bearing an unidentifiable maker's mark, almost obscured by rust. Drawing a steadying breath, he positioned the jaws of the bolt cutters around the shackle. A tremor ran through his arms as he applied pressure. The metal resisted. He readjusted his grip, clenched his teeth, and squeezed with all his strength. A sharp, definitive crack echoed in the stillness, the severed lock fallen away. He nearly stumbled from the sudden release of tension. Instantly, a palpable rush of cold air surged upwards from the floor, as if a hidden vent had opened, though every window remained shut tight. The pressure returned to his chest, heavy and insistent. He forced a long exhale, trying to regain composure. He tossed the broken padlock aside and gripped the iron ring pull. The trap door was immensely heavy, protesting with a high-pitched squeal from its ancient hinges as he heaved it open. Dust rained down into the black cavity revealed below. A smell rose to meet him. Musty, yes, but different from simple mold. It smelled of deep earth, stagnant air, and something else, something indefinably old. He clicked on his flashlight, its beam cutting a bright cone into the abyss. A narrow wooden staircase descended into impenetrable darkness. The steps appeared worn smooth but structurally sound. He took one tentative step down, then another, the flashlight beam probing ahead. The walls felt cool and damp beneath his questing fingers. The air grew thick, difficult to draw into his lungs. His heartbeat was a frantic drum against his eardrums. At the bottom, the beam swept across a small, low-ceilinged chamber, perhaps 10 feet square, walled with rough-hewn stone. Against one wall stood a plain wooden table. Nearby, crude shelves held rows of glass jars. Each was veiled in a thick coat of dust. He approached cautiously, wiping one clean with his sleeve. Inside were desiccated herbs or leaves, brittle and brown. Another contained a murky liquid, darkened and separated by time. A shiver traced its icy path down his spine, raising goose flesh despite the cellar's chill. Beside the table rested a wooden box, reinforced with tarnished iron corners and secured by a simple latch. Intricate carvings adorned its lid, a peculiar symbol resembling 3 interlocking circles. It resonated with no familiar meaning. His palms felt slick with sweat as he reached for the latch. It wasn't locked. Lifting the lid, his light fell upon a small cache of brittle, ribbon-tied letters and a compact metal object swaddled in dark, decaying cloth. He carefully unwrapped the object. It was a small bell, intricately chased with alien markings. As his fingers closed around it, an unnatural coldness seeped into his skin, far colder than the ambient air. Just then, a sharp, percussive thump resonated from somewhere above, the distinct sound of a heavy door slamming shut. He froze, flashlight beam fixed rigidly on the dark stairwell leading up. His heart leapt into his throat. He listened, half expecting footsteps, the rush of an intruder, but only profound silence followed. Pocketing the letters and the unnerving bell, Elias retreated up the stairs, his legs trembling beneath him. Reaching the bedroom, he paused again, listening. The house remained quiet, yet the atmosphere felt subtly altered, heavier somehow. He wedged a nearby chair under the lip of the open trap door to prevent it from closing unexpectedly. Then, cautiously, he moved back into the living room. The front door was securely shut. The wind had picked up outside, he noted, rattling a loose pane somewhere. That must have been the source of the noise, he told himself, though the explanation felt thin, unconvincing. The pressure in his chest persisted, his palms damp. Seating himself on the worn divan, he retrieved the letters. The script was archaic, spidery, a challenge to decipher. He painstakingly picked out fragmented warnings. Must be kept sealed, and under no circumstances is the door to be opened, and implore you, do not permit entry. His stomach twisted into a tighter knot. Whoever penned these missives was utterly convinced of some lurking peril below. His throat felt parched, his eyes beginning to ache from the strain. The letters offered no specifics about what resided in the cellar, only dire, repeated admonitions against disturbing it. He drew out the small bell again, turning it over in his hand. Tiny, precise etchings covered its surface, shapes reminiscent of some forgotten alphabet glimpsed in dusty antique shops. He gave it a tentative shake. Instead of a clear chime, it produced a muted, dull clink, less like a bell and more like softly struck lead. Goosebumps erupted across his skin. He felt an unshakable certainty that this object was intrinsically linked to the sealed cellar and its secrets. Over the ensuing hours, Elias attempted to impose order on the house. He swept gritty floors, wrestled open stiff windows to invite in drafts of fresh air, wiped down surfaces layered with time's residue. But his focus continually fractured, his thoughts snagging on the cellar, the letters, the cold bell. Each recollection brought the familiar, nauseating clench to his gut. Faint, furtive sounds persisted at the edge of his hearing, a whisper-light scratching, a soft tapping from beneath the floorboards. Yet, whenever he stilled himself to listen, absolute silence reigned. Night fell again, thick and absolute beyond the windows. He opted for the cot in the living room once more. Before settling, he returned to the bedroom, removed the chair, and firmly closed the heavy trap door. He then dragged the cot slightly, angling it so the bedroom door remained within his line of sight. He wasn't sure what he anticipated, but vigilance felt essential. He lay awake for what felt like an eternity, every creak of the old house, every sigh of the wind amplifying his pulse. Eventually, exhaustion dragged him under. Sometime deep in the heart of the night, a sudden, explosive thud ripped him from sleep. It emanated directly from the bedroom. His heart surged, adrenaline flooding his system as he scrambled upright. The small lamp still cast its weak circle of light. A glance at his watch showed it was just past 2 in the morning. Mouth desert dry, he crept down the hallway, flashlight clutched in a white-knuckled grip. He paused at the bedroom door, listening. A scraping sound reached him now, visceral and distinct, like something heavy being dragged across the wooden floor within. Taking a shaky breath, he turned the cold knob and pushed the door open. The trap door was ajar. He knew with chilling certainty he had closed it securely before lying down. Now it gaped open just enough to reveal a sliver of the Stygian blackness below. The pressure on his chest intensified, feeling like phantom hands pressing down. He stepped fully into the room, flashlight beam trembling as he aimed it at the trap door. The light illuminated the top few steps descending into nothingness. He could see nothing moving. He stood rooted, breathing shallowly, skin clammy with cold sweat. The scraping sound had stopped. Stillness descended again, thick and watchful. Then, with shock and violence, the trap door slammed shut of its own accord. The force of its impact sent dust billowing upwards, and Elias leaped back, nearly dropping the flashlight. He stumbled backward out of the room, breath coming in ragged gasps, and pulled the bedroom door shut behind him. His mind reeled, bordering on panic. He felt faint, disoriented. With a surge of desperate strength, he shoved a nearby armchair against the bedroom door, wedging it beneath the knob. Then he began pacing the living room, trying to impose logic on the impossible. His arms shook uncontrollably, his shirt clung to his back, soaked in cold sweat. A powerful urge to flee, to abandon the house entirely, warred with a stubborn, inexplicable tether holding him there. He couldn't simply drive away, pretending this hadn't happened. For the remainder of the night, he sat rigidly on the cot, flashlight beam trained unwaveringly on the hallway leading to the barricaded door. No further sounds broke the oppressive silence. The air remained thick and unnaturally cold, but he forced himself to take slow, measured breaths. By the time the first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky, his head throbbed with exhaustion and dehydration. The warnings in the letters echoed in his mind. Whatever was imprisoned below had been sealed for a terrifyingly valid reason. When the sun finally asserted its presence, bathing the dusty room in pale light, Elias rose stiffly. He cautiously moved the armchair away from the bedroom door and peered inside. The trapdoor was closed, flush with the floorboards. He entered hesitantly, scanning the room, half convinced something would lunge from the shadows, but all was still. The heavy door on the floor remained shut tight. He felt no inclination to test it again. Instead, he retrieved his duffel, stuffing the ancient letters and the cold metal bell deep inside. He walked out of that bedroom without a backward glance, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, desperate to escape the lingering chill and the memory of that violated seal. He reached the front door and stepped out onto the porch. The crisp morning air felt like a physical reprieve. He inhaled deeply, tasting dew and damp earth on the breeze. Habit made him turn the key in the lock, though he knew such mundane barriers were meaningless now. Standing there, hands shoved deep in his pockets, he felt the solid weight of the strange bell pressing against his thigh. Uncertainty churned within him. Should he seek help? From whom? Or should he simply abandon this inheritance altogether? The ache in his chest hadn't subsided. His stomach still roiled with residual fear. Even out here, away from the trapdoor's immediate influence, he couldn't shake the feeling of being observed, as if the house itself watched him through its dark window eyes. It was his now, this place of shadows and secrets, wanted or not. But one thing was starkly clear. He couldn't face another night alone within those walls, not after what he had witnessed, what he had heard. He descended the porch steps, needing movement, needing distance. He found himself pacing the perimeter of the ragged field behind the house, concentrating on the crunch of dry grass underfoot, the whisper of tall weeds against his jeans. Each time his gaze drifted back towards the house, the tightness constricted his chest anew. His mind remained snagged on the cellar, the scraping, the icy draft, the terrifying finality of the slamming door. He craved oblivion, forgetfulness, but the broken padlock, the brittle warnings in his bag, the memory burned too vividly. Perhaps exhaustion and stress had played tricks on his mind. No, the evidence was too tangible, the fear too visceral. He had to get away, regroup, maybe find someone knowledgeable about such phenomena. Finally, he reached his truck, climbed into the driver's seat, and sat for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles shone white. His hands still trembled slightly. He started the engine, the familiar rumble a small comfort in the vast, unnerving silence. As he drove away, the house shrank in his rearview mirror, becoming a dark silhouette against the morning sky. His heart hammered with every backward glance, every imagined flicker of movement in the shadowed windows. The pressure in his chest remained, a heavy stone lodged beneath his ribs. This wasn't an ending, he knew with chilling certainty. It was merely a retreat. He was leaving, for now, but the house, and whatever waited patiently in its cold, stone heart, would draw him back. He just had to hope he'd be ready when that time came.